Hello and welcome to Unsourced Wall. My name is Elvis, and as always, I'm your host. Okay, so this is going to be kind of a long one because not only do we have a bunch of reviews to get through, including Joker, the new episode of Titans, and like a huge bunch of comics that I thought were really interesting, we do also have to kick off the second annual Unsourced Wall Halloween Blowout. We did this one last year, and I had a lot of fun with that, so we're doing it again. But first off, let's start off with some movie news, and we finally have the first full trailer for the Birds of Prey movie. One thing I will say about it is that, like I thought from the teaser, it's that it looks like a real cinematic movie with an actual budget being put to good use visually. Other than that, it looks like it might be kind of like Deadpool 1 levels of annoying. Now, I like the first Deadpool movie, but it could be kind of grating for as tight and succinct as it could be. And this trailer just filled to the brim with that. Parts of it look like it's going to be pretty fun or exhilarating in a crude way, but other aspects come off as cloying and grasping, overstuffing and overplaying the humor to a kind of unbearable degree, which isn't the best look for a first trailer. I think there's still a wealth of potential for this, but I just hope the balance between it being an actual movie and just being a potshot of fourfold narration jokes is something more tenable in the final product. Oh, and that Black Mask actually wears his mask. For a full trailer, there are no shots of him in an actual mask, so fingers crossed. We also have the second full trailer for The King's Man, and well, it still looks like a wildly fun time, and I can't wait for it. Also, one last thing for movie news is that apparently there is petition to get Robert Downey Jr. a nomination for an Academy Award for Best Actor, which is kind of ridiculous because it wasn't even that good a movie and he did an okay job in it, and the fact that we're doing a whole petition for it from the fans reminds me a lot about how the Oscars was going to implement the Best Pop Culture Oscar Award, and everyone just made fun of that because there's such a clear way to kowtow to big studio blockbuster movies just like this. But instead of making fun of it, people genuinely want it, and it's just the most hilarious thing. It's so ridiculous and so stupid, and you can't even petition the Academy for this kind of thing. It's not how it works. So it's really just a whole insane thing to see it come about. And really stemming from this is that we have Martin Scorsese getting really lambasted on Twitter about how he said that Marvel movies and superhero movies aren't really cinema because they're more like amusement rides and roller coasters and theme parks. And well, that's honestly insanely true. But he's been getting like so much flack for it, and people are trying to say that even the most mediocre Marvel movies are better than some of Scorsese's best movies, which is tickling my sides here. Because honestly, this is coming off the heels of weeks and weeks of people trying to save Spider-Man from Sony. And the fact of the matter is that if these were actual films that you felt could actually stand up the test of time and could actually be seen in the future as like classics, I think someone actually said that Marvel movies like important cultural films sometime this week, which was hilarious, then you wouldn't really care so much about the branding, right? Like superhero movies in general then would be an art in itself. So you wouldn't have to save Spider-Man from Sony to Disney. That wouldn't really matter. That would be more ephemeral than anything. But far be it from me. People who are going against Scorsese for this are probably the same people who even did that, and they don't even see the hypocrisy in that, or at least the doublethink in that. So it's been a wild ride. And honestly, it hopefully winds down, because this entire trying to treat Marvel movies as classic films it's ridiculous. It really is. Heading on to TV news, we have some developments about the DC Universe streaming service that have come straight out from NYCC, and that is that they are developing two new show concepts. The first is a show called Bizarro TV, which will be an anthology sketch show featuring short stories about obscure DC characters like Slam Bradley and Space Cabbie. It kind of sounds like that short-lived Bizarro Comics anthology series, which was pretty wide and varied, so I hope the show follows suit. The second is based on an open call fan contest where DC fans are being encouraged to submit their ideas for a reality show that could end up being made. It's kind of lame sounding, but damn it if the idea for a show where Jeff Johns shows off his collection of cereals or his 100 Bo Duke action figures didn't come straight to mind. I'd watch something like that for sure. So fingers crossed that something worthwhile comes out of that too. And lastly, in comic news, Quantum and Woody is getting a new series written by Christopher Hastings, which would be a perfect fit and awesomely exciting if it didn't have the really dull Valiant reboot baggage backstory in tow with it. Honestly, I just don't care about Quantum and Woody as they are now, and it just seems like a waste of potential to have Christopher Hastings have to work with that. So, oh well, fingers crossed. And so we can head on to what I read this week. First off, we have the Green Lantern number 12. I have to say, this would have been an entertaining issue had there been anything to grasp in the issues leading up to it. This entire first season started out with a lot of promise, with a great balance of being both out there, but also entertaining and weighty whenever necessary. But right around the incredibly interesting plot development of Hal going undercover, which was just this brilliant conceit all on its own, the series just became too ephemeral and just too fluid to really invest in or care about. It throws out fun sounding concepts, and Liam Sharp's art works overtime on every single page, but the story drive is just so lackluster that it's almost limp. I think the best issue of the second half of this series had to have been the annual, because it told something that felt like it had actual tangibility as a story. Issues like this, which filled the back half, throw out a lot of good ideas to the wall, but somehow still feel unfulfilling and hollow. There's some good gags for sure, and as usual, the hooks are pretty damn intriguing, but unless they get rounded out and grounded, that's all they will be. I just think this season's ambition was far longer than its reach, and I hope a second season picks up on it. I don't dislike it, but as it winded down, it felt hard to have any kind of emotional, tethering or bind to it. I'm going to be checking out the Black Stars Interlude mini that's set to come out soon, and fingers crossed that it shows some improvement, and that season 2 is actually, something really engaging, because this really wafted 2 thumbs middle. Next up, we have the Immortal Hulk number 24, and I think this series is right about to win me back. I have to say, first off, that I still think the whole Abomination subplot was kind of a boring waste of time, and that it was also kind of pointless, which is what I've said before, and how it makes sense that it was something that Bennett suggested rather than being part of Ewing's plan from the get-go. It didn't even really feel like it was necessary to get Hulk to the point where he is now, or even to get 40 and out of the picture. You could have replaced it with anything, or written it out entirely, and nothing in the story would have changed that much. It just seems like a waste of such an iconic Hulk fixture. But all that aside, this was definitely a great issue. Although the fight between 40 and the Hulk is kind of lacking, it carries with it enough weight to feel rather gripping, with Hulk just rebelling in it in just the right, absolutely smug way he knows how to. His bravado and egoism throughout the issue, with and without a face, is just beautiful. It's part of that same root core attitude to this series that the first issues excelled at, and that has been kind of missing for a long stretch so far. Although the real feather in the issue's cap isn't any of that. It's that it starts the road toward making the cosmic, philosophical, Satan-bent angle of the series actually kind of interesting. We get this amazing tethering to the Fantastic Four, Cosmic Rays, Franklin Richards, and the One Above All, and what all of that actually means to the Hulk and this run. And it actually sharpens the image of this entire One Below All BS that's been, in my view, plaguing the series. Now that we actually know what this is, and what it's meant to be playing off of, and why and how, it makes all the detours a lot more engaging than they had been. And yeah, I know there's an argument for just wait and see how the story develops, which is true, but it doesn't make it an easy journey when it feels more like annoying barging in and distractions than actual thematic meat. This changes that. It doesn't change it all the way, but having this direct contrasting and an amazingly eerie final few pages set out this unforgettable mood, threat, impact, and actual goal. Apparently number 25, the exercise issue, will pick up from descending. And like I said, that one will be the make it or break it for me here. The One Below All and the cosmic baggage has always felt like it's been weighing down what works about the series. But if this is a sign of actual momentum to come for them, then I'm all for it. I'm hoping for the best here. But overall, 2 thumbs up. Let's see what number 25 can bring. Moving along, we have The Dreaming number 14. And you know what? I think I should be mad. I should be definitely mad that this issue is as good as it is. I should be enraged that it can be so good, while the last few issues have been almost unreadable, both in terms of quality and structure. But I'm not. I'm actually just relieved that this series has some juice left. It's not an amazing issue by any means, but it's satisfyingly funny, witty, and character driven. The art has been just given a lot more breathing room than previous issues and makes for some fantastic environments and designs. It feels like it could otherwise have been a briefer issue, especially after the chaotic messes of the last 2 issues, if it wasn't actually moving the story forward much farther than those did. So it was nice. It was nice to understand and get immersed in an issue for the first time in a while. It deals in all of Spurrier's strengths in that whole very tricksy and manic plot hook and stingers and sort of gags and punchlines, but it divorces itself from much of his overindulgences, and I hope that it keeps it up, because where it leaves off is actually pretty funny but also very kind of dire, and I'm interested again for the first time. I'm not just like bewildered and trying to figure out the puzzle of the issue. I'm actually in the story now. I'm actually kind of invested, so I just hope it doesn't slide back into just being ridiculous nonsense. I mean, that could be fun, but it's also just a lot less entertaining and a lot less fulfilling than this one was. So, you know what? I'm hoping for the best for this too. 2 thumbs up. I don't mind giving it that because it was just a fun read. And honestly, this run needs more of that. It needs more memorable issues like this that you can actually dig into. And lastly, we have Grendel, Devil's Odyssey #1. After waiting years for the conclusion to the Mage trilogy, Matt Wagner is also bringing readers the continuation, or maybe finale, to the Grendel saga. Last we saw Grendel Prime, the Grendel of the far future post-apocalypse. He was traveling the Earth. Now the world is dying for real, and he's been sent on a mission to colonize a distant planet with only a floating drone head and some embryos. It's kind of a far cry from the evil cat burglar Roots the original series was about, and it's a good start. It's got the same mellow tone that the Hero Denied was chock full of, and maybe Wagner has mellowed out with age. It does seem like kind of a stark contrast with the tone that Grendel had overall. I mean, because Matt definitely let loose some of his inhibitions on those pages, especially the Grendel Prime stuff, but it might have seemed clashing with the aim of this story, which seems to be a little bit more meditative than incredibly outrageous. Time will tell. This issue is pretty much just all set up. It's beautifully rendered setup and drops us back in with ease to the increasingly escalated world of Grendel, but it's still just kind of set up. It's not really something that has much to offer in terms of the story. It just gives out the premise. The dynamic between Prime and his drone head is fun enough, but hopefully things start to fill out as it goes on, because there's not much here past that. We only get a flashback, which is actually pretty interesting because readers have become accustomed to that world, to that dynamic, to that environment, and the entire rest of the issue is separated from that, so it's a bit more to get adjusted and acclimated to. As an issue, it's a decent introduction, but let's see if this can land the franchise on its own 2 feet. 1 thumb up, 1 thumb middle. And before I forget, there's one last thing to review, and that is Legion of Superheroes Millennium #2. You could pretty much just copy and paste my review for the first issue right here because the exact same thing. It's just Bendis going for the lowest effort fan service scenes, dialogue, jokes, gags, and punchlines, but they're all so badly done, set up, and honestly just really limp and lackluster, and honestly it has no energy to it. It's just a bunch of scenes that again have no cohesive tie, no actual narrative function, no real thematic core to them, and it's just an insanely off-putting and honestly kind of condescending read. It is just so genuinely awful, and I can't wait to see how bad his main Legion of Superheroes ongoing is, because I have no idea how or why this was even a prologue to that, because it does nothing to set it up, and in fact it only really puts you off the idea entirely. So fingers crossed, but overall 2 thumbs down. Now we can move on to what I watched this week. We have 1 episode today. It is Titans Season 2, Episode 5, Deathstroke. This is probably the best episode of the mainline season so far. Not any holdout from season 1, and not like the previous episode, which was a full episode flashback. It's the best episode that's completely about the story of this season and the characters of this season. And it's still just pretty okay. There are still some kinks to work out here, but at the very least, the episode is working them out. The biggest thing working against this episode has to have been that everything about Dr. Light turned out to be insanely pointless. He turned out to be something that was just boring and a kind of annoying distraction and fluff that could have been condensed away for the real plot a long time ago. And so the realization of that weighs heavy on this episode, because this could have happened like 3 episodes earlier and it would have been way better for it. But other than that, it's still pretty damn good. The entire team is in place, there's some great character and dynamic meat here, and we've even started to get some grounding out with Rose and her character. Her interplay with the mess that is the Titans is a highlight, and the bouncing back and forth between the characters in the middle had me rolling. And there's just so much friction and pettiness there. It's honestly an engaging watch. It illuminates a lot about the team and the lengths they're willing to go with Deathstroke and with each other. And it makes the entire conflict of the season, that, the actual story, that much more exciting to see unfold. There's clashes and divisions brewing, and I was actually kind of immersed and invested. It's nothing mind-blowing, but I hope it's a sign of change for this season. It's almost halfway over, and we're only now just getting started. Hopefully it doesn't backslide again. The next episode is supposed to be about Superboy, and I really hope we don't have to spend so much time catching up again, because right now it actually has some movement, and I don't want to see that get stalled for anything. Overall, 1 thumb up, 1 thumb middle. And finally, we get to our review of Joker. This is going to be a non-spoiler review because honestly, it's an origin story for the Joker, so you just kind of understand what's going on anyway, and anything interesting about it isn't really spoilerific at all. I'll just get straight to the point. I almost love this movie. I actually still really like it. To get it out of the way, the movie is at its worst when it's playing into the expectations that it set out for itself. This idea that it's meant to be some sort of prestige drama, some deep character study and exploration, when it's really not. And I was shocked that it wasn't. Going into this, I was dreading it because the idea that this was supposed to be some sort of artistic, thematic construct sounded insanely boring and overcooked for this character. I mean, it could have worked, I guess, but the marketing and trailers all made it seem so flat and one note. Like it would be going through the motions of what an elite drama should be, rather than actually being something interesting. But yeah, I was in for a surprise once the movie actually started and got underway, because it ended up being this honestly silly, goofy, and ridiculous movie. A movie that is at its core something slapstick, something almost vaudevillian, and it revels in it. The direction, the visuals, the editing, Phoenix's performance all work to make each and every gag and punchline, whether outright or implied, hit with startling regularity. It's not to say that there isn't a serious edge to it. It doesn't completely bypass the darker, more tragic, hefty elements, but it doesn't really let it get in the way of being a kind of wacky, farcical adventure either. It's like the movie is the punchline itself to a joke set up by the trailers, promising one thing and then sucker punching the audience with something completely different and unexpected. I couldn't have been happier. It ended up being this frantic, almost screwball, madcap, dark comedy, and I nearly fell in love with it by the end. If it weren't for the drawbacks, like I said, when the movie tries too hard to be something it's not, I would definitely rank this as one of my favorites, at least of the last couple of years. But it does try too hard to force some artistic or poetic merits to itself. And these scenes where this happens slow things down to a snail's pace and are honestly unnecessary and almost entirely nonsensical in their actual construction. They come off as more of what something thinks a movie that should be a high caliber, classy drama should be and should have, rather than having any actual meaning in the movie and in itself. So it just kind of comes off as annoying and confounding whenever it crops up. And there are long stretches of scenes like this, and it's like, this could have been cut and made the movie 10 times better for it. But other than that, it's a fun ride. It can be wild, exhilarating, funnily shocking, and carried by an assured direction and the most amazing kinetic physicality the Joker has seen in a while. While the flaws keep me from wanting to see it again anytime soon, I have no doubt I'll get to it eventually. I can't imagine these past few days reading reactions to this movie from others who are saying that it left them feeling hollow and empty. And like, what dramas are you even seeing where something like this, that is like 60 to 70% slapstick farce at its core, makes you lose faith in humanity like that? I mean, it's just so shocking. So overall, I had a good time. Even though it's not like a great movie or like a great film, it's still pretty okay. So overall, 8 out of 10, 2 thumbs up. And finally, we have the special Unsourced Wall Halloween Blowout review. The first one of hopefully 4 is the Return of Swamp Thing, which is none other than Jim Wynorski's sequel to the iconic Wes Craven film Swamp Thing. It's only fitting that this would be the first, given that the original was the first for last year's Blowout. And if you didn't listen to that review, I recommend going back and checking it out. But TLDR, my thoughts on it could be best summed up as admirable, but tiresome and completely uninteresting. It was just a boring movie that stripped a lot of what makes Swamp Thing, even early Bronze Age Swamp Thing, enjoyable, and replaced it with nothing. I really don't rank it at all. The Return of Swamp Thing is kind of a different story, however. As a sequel, I have to say it's overall a huge improvement from the original. That's not saying much, given how low I would even place the original, but at the very least, it tries in some new and entertaining ways that the previous movie didn't even get close to. Where the original focused way too much on some mind-numbing eco-terrorism corporation plot, this actively jumps headfirst into solid B-movie cheese. Anton Arcane, like in the first, is still just a blank slab of a villain, but now it's a blank slab with an evil mad scientist laboratory and evil mad scientist minions. And best of all, it's actively creating unmen. It's not much, but it adds some zest to the movie. Unlike the original, where the only mutations we see were a very little goofy rat thing and Anton Arcane in a very bad werewolf mask. Here, we get a whole slew of ungodly creations, from a man with fly limbs growing out from his head to this main leech-faced monster that, despite certain effects, still managed to look really good for the type of movie this is. It doesn't keep the movie from dragging, which it inevitably does, but it does bring a lot more personality to the table. And speaking of personality, this movie kind of brings that up a notch overall for the tone. The first was a very dry film, and this one is too, but it's desperately aiming not to be. From an opening scene that comes in like a skit from a sketch show, a title card set to a punchline, and an overall campy, ridiculous script and directing method that override everything. The only drawback is that tone and mood and personality is all it has going for it. Tone is tone, but it can only get you so far. The movie just doesn't have enough substance, and so attempts at jokes and a lighter, sillier mood can't mask that. It just means that it'll be goofy while it's boring you. Probably nothing exemplifies this problem more than Abby Arcane. played by Heather Locklear, whose introduction scene is something to behold. She works at this flower shop, and the entire scene is a non-stop, no-breathing monologue about how she loves plants and hates Anton Arcane, and it's a solid minute and a half about nothing but just this insane, over-the-top rant. It's funny. It's a bit wooden, but it's funny. The thing is, like, she's one of the core characters with a dynamic of Swamp Thing that's meant to be one of the pillars of the film, but it's a character that you can gross yourself in, immerse yourself in, engage with, relate with. She never develops or deepens past the kind of characterization she had in that one scene, just being rather goofy and silly and melodramatic and over the top. And if that's all that you have, then it gets kind of old and tired really fast. It's a microcosm of the movie as a whole. That's not to say that the movie dips and then stays down, but any fun scene is only memorable because of the plateaus around it. That it keeps having these little bits and pieces that do work up until the end is just commendable on its own. Swampy giving a chill thumbs up as Arcane's lab gets destroyed is simply perfection. There's a bunch of other stuff too, like these kids that are like this Little Rascals-esque duo going around trying to capture evidence of Swampy or like the Unmen. That is kind of fun too, but again, it's just something that is too undercooked and too underwhelming to really help push the movie forward. It just feels so fragmented, but at the very least, I will have to say that even though neither movie is all that good, if I had to choose one, it would have to be the second one. It's bad, but at least it's reaching out for something more. And while the first one had lofty ambitions, it just never really did anything with them. For all of its mood and, I guess, very dignified tone, it was just like watching paint dry. But with this one, you might be watching paint dry, but at least it's some ridiculous neon color, if that makes any sense. So overall, I do enjoy this movie, but only in the very strictest, very bare bones sense. It's fun, but it's just not worth anyone's time if you value your time. That's all I'll say about it. If you really love Swamp Thing as a character, or if you love the original film, I say check it out. But other than that, proceed at your own risk. Overall, 1 thumb up, 1 thumb middle, and an actual number score of, I think, about 6.5 out of 10. We have no questions this week, and I just want to thank everyone out there who's ever sent a question, comment, or topic to the show. It means so much to me. It's so amazing, and I'm so grateful, so thank you all so much. And I just want to say that if anyone out there has their own questions, topics, or comments they want to hear discussed, you can always find me on Twitter at THE_SNICKMAN. I want to give a shout out to the cover artist for the show at DOTEMCEE. They are fantastic. Please give them a follow. They really deserve it. And I just want to say thank you for listening. This was a great first week to the Unsourced Wall Halloween Blowout. I had a lot of fun talking about Return of Swamp Thing. I'll be putting up the new poll really soon, so please vote on that. We'll see what happens for next week. And I just want to say thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great week, and see you then.